And I'm going to give it right to Tony to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Okay, can folks hear me? Yes, okay. So welcome to the May Los Alamos Mountaineers meeting. I just have a couple of things. There is a upcoming knots class by Kai Davis, which will be 6:30 p.m. on May 31st here at Peak, and you need to sign up ahead of time. Bill will do the trip report, and then we'll have our main presentation by Norbert Ensslin. And actually, I just want to note that this picture here is a picture of Mount Wilson that I took for Norbert before he was going to climb it. Okay, so with that, Bill?
Thank you. And just to expand on the knots class, as part of the climbing school, I guess right at the end of March, we held a knots 1 session. This is worth going to, even if you went to that one. A little bit of review of what was covered at the end of March and going into several knots and more practice, things that weren't covered last time around. So let's talk about trips, because what the Mountaineers do is trips. Yeah, I can get that. And 8 of us went on a classic llama trip in the Escalante Grand Staircase wilderness area, spending a whole week at it in early May. That's the crew. Slick rock for miles, fabulous formations, domes to climb up. Our camp was an oasis in the middle of the slick rock country. Plenty of water and ponds and pools and so on. Next slide, please. And how did we get our gear there? Well, we didn't carry it on our backs, not too much of it. This is a llama transport trip where the llamas went in, dropped off our gear. We set up a camp and spent 6 nights there. And on the last day, the llamas came and got our gear and hauled it out of there. Deep in the wilderness, it was about a 6-mile trip in, and we saw no one for the week. Just us, just our strange little group. Next slide, please. We called this trip Deer Creek Hoodoos because there were a lot of hoodoos. That is rocks standing on pillars of soft sedimentary rock that was left behind. And the rock formations, the sculpture that nature gives us, it's just spectacular. Next slide, please. Boy, who led this Ponderosa Campground hike? Jean Dewart? Super. So there they are, the classic bandolier hike. From Ponderosa Campground all the way down the campground to the Visitors Center. Looks like a healthy crew on a very classic trip for this neighborhood. Next slide, please. It's flower season. It was flower season in the desert too, and they're gorgeous. Going down Frijoles, that's a lot of water for Frijoles Canyon that they hiked down. Next slide, please. Norbert, you were on this trip, so you might tell us a bit about that.
Oh, it was exploring Aztec Creek near Navajo Mountain. That's Steve Minobi lower down. But to look at the little small ruin there, you can go on. That's a hogan we found. One that was written up by David Roberts in a book a couple of years ago. And I want to announce maybe for next year, if I survive tonight, we'll do a program called Searching for David Roberts in Navajo Country.
Okay, we've got some trips coming up. And of course, a lot of the day trips get announced at the last minute. Like I'm still thinking of something for this weekend, maybe Monday. Next slide, please. I think Norbert just announced a climbing afternoon for this Saturday coming up and other adventures that are going out over the year. This gives you a feel for them. Look them up on the webpage. All the details are there. And please, if you want to go somewhere, if you're ready to lead a trip and you want somebody to go with you, advertise it as a Mountaineers trip. And if you need help on organizing a Mountaineers trip, let the board know and we'll help you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Juliana Fessenden, and I am the program chair for the Mountaineers. And I just wanted to share the lineup of all the programs we have for this year. And you can see here in May, we're having a history of Los Alamos Mountaineers by Norbert, but you can see next month with skiing, and then Wind River Traverse and bicycling. So just a whole mix of programs coming up. So please do come out. We have our programs here at the Peak, the fourth Tuesday of most months. And we're starting to think about the potpourri. And so if you have a 10-minute talk that you would like to consider speaking to us at the potpourri, please contact me. My email you'll see on occasion. Well, you probably saw it for this announcement. And please do reach out if you've got a trip to share. And I wanted to encourage folks after the talk to get the wonderful cookies that Lynn cooked for us. And thank you very much, Lynn, in the little activity room. And there's lots left, so please do get some cookies. All right. Oh, and now we'll go back to Beth.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just interject a couple logistics for tonight before we get started. Our presenter is going to take questions via Zoom chat and from our in-person audience. So for those of you watching from home, you can find the chat feature in the Zoom app. Type your questions to, it says Peak Moderator on the for the host of the Zoom and in the chat window anytime during the talk, and then I'll read them at the end for Norbert to answer. Please remember that not everybody in the room has a microphone here with us, and it's hard to get around. So there might be a delay when we're listening to the question from the live audience, but Norbert will read them back, and we'll make sure everybody knows what we're asking and answering. So don't worry, we'll be back on in a second. Okay, the last thing is that everybody's going to get a short evaluation in their email. Please take a moment to fill that out. It really, really helps Peak and the Mountaineers and everybody improve for next time. And then I'll hand it back to Tony to introduce Norbert for tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my great honor to introduce Norbert Ensslin, who's going to give us a history of the Mountaineers. We're in our 71st year here. Norbert joined the Mountaineers in 1973. He's been really one of the founders, one of the rock solid folks in the Mountaineers, climbing, doing mountaineering, and really importantly, mentoring many generations of mountaineers, including now because he's leading these climbing activities for the climbing school graduates. So with that, I'm going to give it to Norbert to give us his talk.
Thank you, Tony. Is this working okay? Can you all hear me? Okay. I asked Tony not to announce that I was the oldest member of the club. Thank you, Tony. But we do have some members who joined before I did. Dave Brown, Alice Liska lives in Santa Fe, and Aichi Fukushima in Albuquerque. So we've now reached a point in time where the Mountaineers are 71 years old. It's a very long and rich history. Many people have done many adventures, lots of great outdoor trips, and it was a challenge for me to try to come up with a collection of pictures and stories and anecdotes that we could do tonight in the time that we have. So if I've missed some of your favorite topics, please forgive me, but I tried to pick out some nice pictures and stories that I thought you all might enjoy. I like this picture here. It shows some of the Mountaineers on Lake Peak back in 1957. I don't think I know any of these people, but I like sort of the faded colors of the picture. It makes it look old, and some of the gear that people have in their jackets sort of make me think of the past a little bit. This is a picture taken by John Ramsey, Kathy Ramsey's father. And we have a lot of people to acknowledge. 15 years ago, I think it was Kathleen Grutzmacher, Sharon Dagrell, and I think Melanie Hand that recommended doing a program on the history. How are we doing, Beth? Oh, I saw that. Okay. Thank you. And so at that point in time, I was able to interview a lot of the senior members of the club. I got some great pictures from them, stories and other anecdotes. And so all these folks here helped in some way to put together this presentation. And this year, Bill Podorski asked if we might do it again. And so it's been fun, Bill, to try to remember everything that worked on in the past and try to add a little bit of new stuff too. Here's a quotation from Don Liska about the role of the mountains in our lives. I believe that the mountains symbolize the conjunction of humanity and nature in some very special ways. Always a barrier to expansion, always a challenge to conquest, always a sanctuary for beauty and grandeur, always a test of endurance and acceptance of hardship on nature's terms, always a reminder of beauty and wonder. The mountains play a crucial role in our collective humanity. Above all, our mountainous environment raises us as individuals to more exalted heights. Very eloquent. The role of the club in our lives has been very important in my life, certainly. It's a great place to meet people, explore and enjoy the outdoors, share adventures with them, see places that maybe are very remote or technical that we can't do by ourselves. And for some of us, it's a great place to meet spouses. So I also want to thank Lynn for the cookies. That's why I came tonight. Another quote from Don Liska on the role of adventure in our lives. When we think back on our lives, it's the exciting trips and outdoor adventures that stand out, not the many days in the office. Well, you know, as the years go by and we enjoy doing outdoor things with our friends, in the course of time, we lose some of those friends. So here's a list of club members or former club members or friends of the club that we've lost in the last 15 years. I feel strange about this list. Almost all the people that I interviewed 15 years ago for the history are on this list. So this is something that we couldn't do anymore. We wouldn't be able to recreate the early history of the club because these folks are gone. But each of these people had wonderful, adventuresome lives of their own. It seems to me very inadequate just to have a list of names. But I'll try to show pictures of some of these folks later in the program. And there's just several that I would like to highlight that have made a big impression on me and on the club. Ken Ewing was one of the 7 founding members of the club. The only one I think that many of us have met over the years. He was active in trips, schools, and meetings for about 57 years. He was a very colorful member. He taught us how to make do with less, how to spot avalanche conditions by looking at snow layers, what a porcupine tastes like, how to elect club officers. So some of you, if you're at the meetings in November when the new slate of officers is presented, you might hear somebody mutter, "Let's railroad them through." And that line comes from Ken. Now, I like this picture of Ken because it shows him as a young, vigorous person doing 14ers. But I think when most of us knew him, he was pretty old and frail and sort of eccentric. I remember once we were on a trip and I think he was frustrated that he couldn't keep up and do things that we were doing. And so he said, "You know, I'm the same age as Don Liska, and you all think you're going to end up like Don Liska. You're not. You're going to end up like me." And we said, "Oh no, please, not that." And he said, "Yeah, Don Liska is a Martian." So, but I guess even Martians do pass away in time. Don died about 7 or 8 years ago. Alice still lives in Santa Fe. We enjoy visiting with her. But Don and Alice, over the years, led many major club trips, always with a welcoming attitude to people and adventure. Don did a lot of great club programs over the years on his expeditions to Waddington, Robson, St. Elias, Denali, Greenland, Peru, the Pamirs. His program on Afghanistan was really special. He and Alice climbed Noshak at 24,000 feet, the highest peak in Afghanistan. And Don said proudly, at that moment in time, Alice was the highest woman on Earth. Don was really able to convey enthusiasm, a willingness to accept risk for a richer life, a love of the mountains, and a positive attitude that made his talks unique and inspiring. And as I was working on the program, remembering over the years, had a chance to do some trips, climbing, hiking, or skiing with Don and Alice. They were always really special trips. And then I remembered sort of a dumb analogy that came to me in those days doing trips with the Liskas. It was sort of like you're standing next to a railroad track and you stick out your hand and you catch a passing freight train. And you get dragged at high speed down the tracks. And you're excited and happy and scared all at the same time. And after a while, you're just exhausted. You can't hang on anymore. You let go and fall by the wayside, and you watch the Liskas head off on their next adventure. And you just wish, that you had the energy and the attitude and the courage to be like they are. Jan Studebaker, a very special club member. He passed away last summer. I think many of us were at the really nice memorial service that Bill organized for that. Jan served as president, vice president, climbing school director, webmaster, led many club and private trips. I remember joining him on trips to Yosemite, the Tetons, Pacific Northwest, Red Rocks, even Australia. He loved to go on Bill's llama trips, and he climbed about 16 of the 50 classic climbs of North America. So that's a long list of details. It doesn't really capture the strong, high-energy personality that Jan was. He could really be wild and daring, a little scary sometimes, but he was always a reliable, supportive friend and a really great climbing partner. I think we're going to remember him for a while with some of his famous sayings here. Often you'll be out climbing and you'll hear somebody yelling, "You'll never make it." And then somebody else turns around and says coolly, "Hey, how hard could it be?" Anyway, that's how we'll remember Jan, I think. Okay, so the early years of the club, Mountaineers were founded in 1952. Tom Newton was the first president and Ken Ewing was treasurer. The club started out as the rock climbing section of the Los Alamos Outdoor Association. Meetings were held at the Newton's house, and that's where George and Ginny Bell first met. Ken Ewing was president twice, served as treasurer for some years. He said he kept the treasury in a paper bag in his kitchen. So probably we've gone past that point. But the Mountaineers have had a written constitution since 1962. We joined the Colorado Mountain Club in 1967, but withdrew in 1975. I remember the issue was just the CMC had rules about how far you could safely drive at night or so after doing a 14er, and we just couldn't meet those rules living so far away. A few years ago, Bill, I know you organized some joint trips with some members of the CMC, but I don't remember exactly when that was. Most of our club records were lost at the president's house during the Cerro Grande fire, but the website now includes a written version of our history and a list of past club officers. Larry Campbell was very active in the LA Historical Society, and he put our written history in with their collection too. So in the 50s and 60s, the club used to have 1 or 2 week summer climbing trips. Some of the locations were the Wilsons, Circa the Tower, Tetons, High Sierras, Minarets. In 68, there was the trip to Mount Robson, where George Bell, Dave Brown, and Don Liska were caught in that avalanche on the Cane Face. Here's Tom Newton on the left and David Lind from the University of Colorado on Pingora in the Cirque of the Towers. This is a John Ramsey photo too, and I think John said that it was perhaps only the second climbing trip ever to the Cirque. Here's some of the mountaineers heading off to do Capitol Peak. The gentleman in the middle with the dark hat is Herbert Ungenade, who was well known as the author of the guidebook on climbing New Mexico mountains. Ken Ewing and Emily Wilbanks on Conejos Peak. 14er trips were really popular with the early club. Chuck Mader told me that in those days they used to take their cars up to Colorado, but then rent an old World War II Jeep because the roads were very rough and they wanted to get close enough to the 14ers to be able to do them. This picture of Chuck Mader in the Crestones was the cover photo for a book called Durango Light, a novel written by a friend of his named Ed Williamson and set in the San Juans. And it featured a character based on Chuck Mader. So Chuck gave me a copy of the book to read. It was sort of fun. And in 59, I guess Chuck became the 65th person ever to climb all the 14ers. Here's a photo of Don Liska. He and Ken Ewing and Dave Brown used to lead beginner rock climbing parties on the Blanca Little Bear Traverse. I like this picture of Don. He's got sort of a puzzled look on his face. I'm imagining to myself that he's asking himself, how did that guy with the camera get ahead of me? But that's just my thought. So here's a picture of the Blanca Little Bear Traverse. The first two folks here are John Saraceno and Mark Feldhauser. Here's Faye and Dave Brown with their son Nicholas on Humboldt Peak in 73. The Browns came to Los Alamos in 1967. Bob Cowan was a very active member of the club all through his life. He provided a lot of great photos for our history and a lot of good information. Here he is in front of the Crestones. 14ers in winter are really hard to do. A lot of equipment, hard work, no guarantee of success because the weather is changing every day. Some of the popular trips I remember were doing Crestone Peak via the Red Gully and Blanca Peak. This is Aichi Fukushima in the foreground, carrying a really heavy pack. So club members are still doing 14ers. Here's a photo of Ray and Joy Green, two of our younger members, and enjoying El Diente. Some members of the club have climbed all the 14ers. Here's a list of the names that I know, but there's probably other folks that have done it too that I just didn't know about. This is a nice picture of Lynn, the Fazios, and Dennis Brandt at the playground of the Bears. Favorite Colorado 13ers over the years have included Pigeon and Turret, and Arrow and Vestal Peak. At least these three members have done all 100 Centennial Peaks, and I know that Tony Taylor and I are pretty close to that number. So the Brazos Cliffs, this was a really big part of the club for many years. Here's a photo of the main cliffs taken by George Bell for his article in the CMC magazine, Trail and Timberline. George and Ginny Bell came here in the early 50s and were the first to explore the Brazos. They made the first ascents of Easy Ridge and the Great Couloir in 1952. Don Liska said that he started climbing the Brazos from 66 all the way to 2003, about a 38-year period with 9 first ascents. Cat Burglar is the climb way over to the left, just to the left of that giant vertical boxcar. Great Couloir is the route sort of on the right side. Those are the more sustained pitches of that climb. George Bell wrote in his article that for the last 20 years, we in Los Alamos have been enjoying our favorite Brazos climbs, or cliffs, not exactly secretly, but at least quietly. One way to approach some of the back climbs is the Brazos box, wading up the river. This is Roland Pettit, a club member and author of his hiking guidebook some years ago. So if you do the Brazos Overlook ski tour, which many of us has done, you end up skiing across the top of the wedge. Right below you is the Brazos box, and you're looking over at the Gothic wall. And the main cliffs from here would be back around to the left. So a lot of us have seen this nice view of the Brazos, even if we haven't been climbing there. For about 20 years, half of all club trips went to the Brazos every year. Roughly 45 routes were documented. In 1968, France Cordova, when she was our president, encouraged us to write a guidebook to the Brazos. It would have been a good idea, a good project for the club, would have brought us together on a nice thing to do. But a lot of us members did vote against it because we wanted to preserve the wild character of the area. So the Brazos rock can be pretty scary and broken up. Every belay ledge just has a pile of rubble on it. If you want to reach up and grab a hold, you don't just grab it. First, you hit it with your palm to make sure it's solid. Then you grab it. So over the years, I think as we got older and wiser, we began climbing more and more at other areas that had better quality rock. I think a few years ago, Jason Halliday and Josh Smith did a couple of climbs in the Brazos, but I don't know if anything's still happening there these days. So they are truly reverting back to wilderness, and someday there'll be a new generation of adventure climbers that are sort of tired of sport climbing, that want to really go route finding, exploring, find new routes, give them new names, and so maybe that'll happen someday. Shiprock was an important part of our history too. The mountaineers did perhaps 50 to 60 ascents. Don Liska said he first climbed it in '59 and did a record 9 ascents. Alice Liska was the 15th woman to make the top. Here's a spectacular picture. It's hard to see, but Don and Alice Liska are standing on those two pinnacles on the top of the north summit. And the photo was taken by their friend Ernie Anderson, who was circling the summit in Stretch Fretwell's plane. There was a big accident on Shiprock in 1970. Some California climbers got caught in an early snowstorm, were staggering around, disoriented. Several of them almost died. The mountaineers drove up there and did a spectacular rescue. And Don said that was the biggest rescue the club was ever involved in. That accident led immediately to the closure of the entire reservation to climbing. Don Liska in the black shirt and Larry Campbell on the Larry Dalsberg on the left in the white shirt received documents of commendation from President Nixon for that rescue. Here's an interesting shot from the register on Shiprock. Shiprock was first climbed in '39, and here's a 30th anniversary ascent in '69. And the climbers were George Bell, Will Seary, Aichi Fukushima, and Mike Hart. Now, some people say that Shiprock is still climbed sometimes, but the only way to know that for sure, I guess, would be to go to the top and look at the register. Mexican volcanoes. A number of club members have done trips there over the years. Don wrote a little guidebook to them. Polpo and Ixter were climbed in '67 by the Liskas and the Browns. And there's a list of club members have done trips in more recent years. Mike Sullivan was there in '98, and maybe other folks since then that I just don't know about. Here's Bob Cowan, John Saraceno, Bill Johnson, and Scott Rogers on Ixty. The climbing school has been a really big part of the club. I was told it started in the late 1950s, originally at the Back Rocks. It gradually transitioned to White Rock. Potrillo was used for a lot of the top roping sessions, also for rappel practice. An important part of our school was teaching people what it was like to catch a leader fall. And this is hard to teach, but at the Back Rocks, they used a giant steel anvil. And then later at the Y, they used some big heavy steel springs. And Jim Strait worked hard for about 20 years, taking the lead and rigging this complicated setup, so that the students in the school could get a feel for what it was like to catch a leader fall. Here's a picture of Ruth Kirkpatrick smiling while she catches a leader fall. Way off in the upper right-hand corner is Dave Dogrell. He's smiling too because he's got his hand on the trigger to release the weight. Although I think most of the time, Jim, you were the one who liked to release that weight, weren't you? You were sort of wicked in that regard. I remember right, yeah. And in fact, I think Jim used to sort of distract the students, make them look away a little bit, and then he'd pull the trigger really quick. But whether you were ready for that or not, it's a real shock to the body to catch that kind of a weight. And I still remember that because nowadays you go out and see the younger generation climbing, and often they're just standing there nonchalantly belaying the leader, and they just don't realize what would happen to them if there was a real leader fall. The school used to include snow climbing practice, often at Pajarito. Here's a shot of Ken Ewing demonstrating ice axe technique. And he used to dig a hole in the snow and show us the different layers so we could learn to read avalanche conditions a little better. Self-arrest practice was often done on some of the steep slopes up by Ravens Ridge or Lake Peak. And we used to do rope climbs up that cirque on the below the summit of Lake Peak. So the snow class was discontinued around 1990, but I know that you, Michael Alter, have been helping us organize or know about avalanche training sessions. So there's still interest in that. Graduation climbs for the school used to be in the Sandias when I first came here, but that was horrible. So we shifted to El Rito and then later also Tres Pedras. So I think you can look back and say the climbing school has been a great service to the community, an excellent source of new club members. And this year, we are fortunate to have Bill Podorski organize a successful new climbing school with evening classes at Peak and then climbing sessions with a guide service from Taos up at Tres Pedras. In the move of the school from the Back Rocks to White Rock sort of happened in parallel as people were discovering the cliffs in White Rock. Harry Hoyt and Bob Taylor discovered Portillo in 1954. Shortly thereafterwards, Leighton Core came down to visit and did some climbs there. So some of the routes are named for Leighton Core or for his girlfriend. He also provided our local rating system, which means grossly underrated sandbags. So I think, but what's neat about climbing in White Rock is your mind can be totally full of work at the office. You get in your car, you drive down there, a half an hour later, you're hanging on desperately on the rock, focusing with all your mental energy to hang on and do a climb. And all the day's work is sort of pushed out of your head. It's very, very mentally refreshing. Len Margolin discovered the Y in 1970, the Overlook in 1971. The Overlook has his namesake climb, Len's Roof. So in those days, when we did first ascents, we meant a first ascent on top rope. We weren't leading originally. The Horak brothers discovered the playground, and they kept it to themselves for a while because they wanted to do some top rope first ascents. But everything was too hard. They couldn't get up anything. So they sarcastically called it the playground. Back in those days, the senior members of the club didn't like top roping. I think they considered it contrived, making up artificial little exercises that you couldn't be doing on a real mountain. You wouldn't have time or energy. But anyway, by '73, the new climbers established a Wednesday evening climbing schedule, and then which changed to Tuesday, Thursday later. And then after a while, we started leading in White Rock, which was pretty darn hard, but it gave us the skills to start doing trips to Yosemite, the Oregons, Lumpy Ridge, and so on. The club had a search and rescue team from 1972 to about 1988, but it just got too hard to stay certified with the state, so we gave it up. Ken Ewing often volunteered to be the victim, so he got bounced around a lot on the rock. The gentleman here on the left in the light blue shirt is Herb Kinsey. He helped a lot with search and rescue. Herb used to have a climbing store in his home in Santa Fe, and he also helped us a lot with the school. He would come out on first school day, bring a lot of slings, other gear, and sell it to the students right there. It was very, very helpful. Over the years, there's been some fatal accidents involving club members or friends of the club. Here's the list that I know about. I don't think any of these were actually club trips, except maybe the one in '65 where Herbert Unganade, Frank Pretzel, and Bob Day died in a fall in a couloir on the Maroon Bells. I've been told that climb really was a shock in Los Alamos, and a lot of people went to that funeral. It really impacted the club's reputation. We had a bad reputation for quite a few years after that. But even nowadays, if we have a small accident or so, we tend to have a discussion session and talk about what went wrong, lessons learned, how we can do things better in the future. And a lot of that was done in the past for these serious accidents. The senior club members had us adopt rules to increase awareness of mountaineering danger. They recommended providing more of a total mountaineering experience because it's easy to develop technically very quickly without having the experience to do things safely. But instead, what happened, I think, is that the club sort of shifted away from snow and ice and rock climbing more towards newer sports like canyoneering or sport climbing, backpacking, mountain biking. So it was a real change in the tone of the club over the years. If I think back on that, I don't know quite what to say. I guess we all have to find that personal balance between risk and reward in the outdoor adventures that we do. I think the club can offer us a wide range of activities, but we each have to take responsibility for the activities that we choose to do. Ski mountaineering and ski touring, that began with the club members, I guess, in 1970, I was told. And back in those days, the annual 24-mile trip from the Pajarito ski area all the way through the back valles to La Cueva was the club's most popular winter trip. But in those days, you could go in January with a big group and you could expect to have good snow. But other trips, Dave Brown used to lead trips to Jicarita Peak, trips to the Brazos Overlook. Gene Dewart has led a lot of trips over the years to Cumbres Pass. And the Liskas used to lead a trip from their cabin in Crested Butte over to Aspen. The trip from Pajarito to La Cueva has also been done at night, and that is really a wild experience. Don Liska loved this trip. One week he did 3 solo crossings, 2 during the day, and the first nighttime crossing. So ski touring today, I think ski mountaineering per se is less popular, but a lot of folks enjoy hut trips or ski racing events. We're lucky to have the Valle Grande accessible again, letting us do some nice ski adventures really close to home. And this year, Jeff Click led the 11-mile trip from Pajarito to the Valle Grande again. Also, Gene Dewart led an overnight trip to Crater Lake. On a warmer topic, Merle Wheeler came to Los Alamos 1973 from Tucson, and he began introducing us to some of his favorite areas in Navajo country, some of the slick rock around Navajo Mountain in particular. Here's a shot of him doing one of his favorite activities that he called dome running. Merle also loved toe-hold routes and getting into dark, narrow, slimy slots. Here's Mike Sullivan showing off what happens to your body if you get yourself wedged into those slots. Here's Steve Renault and Ron Morgan playing the slots, as you used to call it, in the Upper West Canyon. Merle also introduced us to the Grand Canyon on some long, serious backpacks, sort of taught us how to navigate vertically through the layers of the canyon. We had to learn how to carry lots of water, food that wouldn't melt if it was really hot, and how to think like burros if you try to follow little burro trails. More recently, Rick Light led a series of trips to the canyon for us. Merle's trips usually involved some pretty exciting moves with a backpack. He didn't believe in staying on trails. Merle and Carl Keller did a trip where they carried a raft to cross the river, and so we could get into lower Nankoweap Creek. And that was a tough, exhausting trip. Oh, okay, I'll try. And here's the party resting up. This is Dennis Brandt in the middle having a nice rest. Merle told us that he was on the second party to ever climb Vishnu Temple. This might have slipped a little bit too. And in '77, we returned back to try that again. And here we are on top of Vishnu Temple. Really, we were the 7th ascent party, I guess. And that is a spectacular spot. You have Grand Canyon views all the way around, 360 degrees. Don Liska and Aichi Fukushima came to Los Alamos after some years of climbing in the Northwest. Aichi led a trip back there in '73, and Don led one back in '82.
And since then, a lot of folks have done informal trips back to Rainier, North Cascades, Ptarmigan Traverse, other areas. A few years ago, Gwendolyn Gallagher and Ron Morgan, I'm not sure who else, but maybe you, Don, John, I climbed Rainier. And also we had a program from Jason Halliday and Andy Teen on snowboarding down some of the peaks. Here's Don Liska and Jim Sprinkle at Cap Hazard on the Couts Icefall route. On the right in the Couts Icefall, that might be Mike Fazio, I'm not sure. A lot of club trips to the Tetons over the years, according to Ken Ewing. In 54, John Ramsey, Don Liska, and Wally Green climbed the direct Exum Ridge. George Bell and Don Liska led some other trips in 87 and 67, 68. And then there are some later trips that I'm involved with back in the 80s. Here's a nice photo of some of the mountaineers on top of the Grand. Carol Sutcliffe, Cliff Meyer, unknown climber, Stu Bowling, and Elizabeth Kelly and Jan Studebaker. So in fact, the last club trip to Tetons was in 2014, your trip, Michael. And but Elizabeth Kelly told me that she and Rob Ryan are going back this August to do the direct Exum Ridge with a guide. So other major climbs, Chris Horley has climbed Choi Oyu, one of the 8,000 meter peaks in the Himalayas. Other club members have climbed Denali, Aconcagua, Mount Cook, Kilimanjaro. Also climbs in the Bugaboos, including the nice program that Jonathan Regley gave us last month. So Yosemite, in '84, Chris Foster initiated a series of club trips going all the way through '95. And since then, there's been a lot of informal trips to Yosemite. Also, following on the Yosemite trips, many trips to City of Rocks, Red Rocks, Cochise Stronghold, Waco Tanks. Here's the first Mountaineers trip to Yosemite. Jan Studebaker, Lou Horak, Jim Strait, myself, Dennis Brandt, Ralph Menikoff, some scruffy climber in a white shirt, I'm not sure who, Chris Foster, and Dave Barlow. We enjoyed doing friction climbing on the Glacier Point apron. That's sort of a mental rather than a physical activity. You've got to be very careful on your feet. Occasionally you may take a really long slider. I remember you, Jim, Jim Strait, used to sew a leather patch on the butt of your pants. And I saw you fall once and slide, and you just deftly spun around and slid down on that leather patch. I was impressed. Here's Jim demonstrating good technique on the apron, taking baby steps, keeping your weight carefully over your feet, just being cool. Roy Luck on the apron too. In those days, there was a new book out by Steck and Roper called The 50 Classic Climbs of North America. And so everybody in the country ran off to do these climbs. And for us, it was a fine reward for having worked hard on our climbing skills here in White Rock. And so we did a bunch of these in Yosemite, Tetons, Wyoming, Colorado. Here's a spectacular picture of Jim Strait on the Crux Aid pitch of the East Buttress of Middle Cathedral Rock. Almost exactly the same picture as the cover picture on the 50 Classic Climbs book. So Jim, you made the big time. About the same time, Gary and Lynn Clark, who were very active here in the club for many years, prepared a list of classic climbs that Gary had sort of picked out over the years based on his experience. And one that he added here was a Snake Dyke on Half Dome, a long, spectacular exposed route. Fantastic exposure. There's a bolt every half rope length, whether you need it or not. So here's a party that survived doing Snake Dyke. There's Greg Brickner, Ralph Menikoff, Steve Iverson, Lou Horak, and Jim Strait. So changing venues a little bit in parallel with all of these trips to mountainous areas. So Bill Podolsky has led us a large series of trips to explore Utah's canyon lands. He's led about 120 very popular canyon trips in Escalante, Moab, and Bluff regions. He also remembers leading at least as many trips to local areas and doing winter ski outings. So roughly 250 trips. This must be about between 10 and 20% of all the trips ever led in the entire history of the club. So I think that's really impressive. It's been a tremendous part of the club. Bill's llama trips are, I think, especially popular. They allow folks to go camping, take more gear, more comfortable campsites, more relaxed camping experience, more time to go exploring. I've been told that traveling with llamas adds a whole nother dimension to the adventure. Here's Jan Studebaker and his llama. He always tried to have a good relationship with his llamas, but I think I heard sometimes they were bad outcomes instead. I'm sort of listing sport climbing as a new activity. It's been around quite a few years, but not as long as some of us, I guess. But it sort of evolved out of multi-pitch trad gear adventure climbing, and we've been very lucky to have a lot of fine local sport climbing areas right here in White Rock and in the Jemez, including a lot of nice safe routes bolted by Jason Halliday. Oh, here on the right is a picture of the overlook. The big cutout on the right, that's Len's roof. For a few years in the 90s, the club organized meltdown competitions at the overlook. Sport climbing is also lends itself to some nice destination trips. Over the years, we've done a lot of fun trips to City of Rocks and Red Rocks, where we just get a nice place to stay, climb all day, have a nice dinner, and socialize in the evening. But I just realized we were at Red Rocks first week in April, and people were asking us, well, where are you from? New Mexico? Is there any climbing in New Mexico? And I thought, it's lucky that we are not a major destination area. If we were, our climbs would be really crowded. But here's the picture on the left from City of Rocks and one on the right from Red Rocks. So another new activity, technical canyoneering. For some years, Dan Creveling organized some fall trips to Zion, where he'd make plans for small groups to do different canyons every day and sort of circulate through the area. These have been very popular trips too. I think from what I've learned in terms of equipment and techniques, canyoneering is in some ways harder, more technical than rock climbing. But again, it's also a great way to spend time with friends and explore remote canyons. Now, some of us are old enough so that mountain biking is a new activity. So forgive me for saying that. But anyway, so the Tough Riders Club spun off from the Mountaineers in the 1980s, I think. But even nowadays, a lot of club members enjoy mountain biking on some of Bill's trips to Moab or other areas. Another new activity, bike packing, is something that's just starting up, I guess. Brett Kettering's been telling us about that a little bit. New club trips close to home. I think we all realized, didn't we, during the pandemic, we were so lucky to live in a place with a lot of outdoor space around us, where we could go hiking, climbing, mountain biking, and without having to make a long trip somewhere else. And one popular local activity is Zach Baker's rubber ducky float trips. He's done a whole series of those just in White Rock Canyon. We've also discovered or rediscovered a lot of local hikes and climbs over the last few years. Bill's introduced us to the Las Cruces Basin here on the right, and Evan Rose taking us on trips to climb Cabazon, I think for the last 3 or 4 years in a row. So those have been really nice new areas to get to know. So as we're sort of wrapping up here and thinking about the long history of the club and all the things that we've been talking about, some of the future challenges perhaps are outdoor access, overcrowding in some places, safety and liability concerns, attracting members in the age of social networking, finding a good balance between risk and adventure. I think we can meet all these challenges if we keep on offering a wide range of activities for the community, and if we include some core activities that maybe require some unique skills or technical skills where you have to do them with other people in order to be successful. And so here's the slide that I ended with 15 years ago. I guess it's still appropriate. I think our future history is going to involve more beautiful scenery and memorable adventures with our friends on future club trips. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Norbert. We have a couple questions that came in online. Do you want to start with anybody here in the room? Anybody have any questions here? Okay. Oh, got one hand up. Okay.
The question is about rock climbing meltdowns. The club just organized a sport climbing competition at the Overlook where there's lots of nice hard bolted areas, and people came from around New Mexico or even other areas to do that competition. And I guess they just named it the meltdown in regards to nuclear issues. That's probably where the name came from. That's all I know, I think.
We actually got that same question online, so
good.
we just knocked one out. Anybody else here in the room before I move on? Okay, so there was a couple comments. One was that Lou Horek passed away in 2014, and he should be added to the list at the beginning of the presentation. Next, Marie says, I believe David Mills climbed Shiprock in 1999-ish. He earned a permit by doing some community service for the reservation. It's interesting, very interesting to know. Carl wants to know, does anyone have any photos of the rappel off Monk's Needle? He remembers that climb after a morning being brutalized by Ludwig in the Black Rocks.
So the question is about climbing Monk's Needle in the Black Rocks. I remember the year I came to town, I think in '73, the school was still there. I got a chance to climb Monk's Needle. The rappel was a big overhanging rappel, and yes, the Ludwig was done up there somewhere too, but I don't have a specific answer to that question. And thank the previous person for the comment on Lou Horak. Just the other night I was thinking, did I leave somebody off that list? And I looked back and I forgot that I had left Lou Horak off, so I apologize. A very nice service for Lou Horak at the Brazos when he passed away. Last time I saw Lynn Margolin.
So just a question right over here. A comment.
When I did this program in 15 years ago, I think I covered George Bell at that time. So I'm not trying to be particular about dates, but I think George Bell passed away earlier than that program. Anyone know for sure? Oh, George Bell passed away in 2000. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That was just a lot of folks in the last 15 years. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so if Carl asked about if anyone else knows of photos of the rappel off of Monk's Needle, you can reply to any of those reminders that you got or the registration emails, and that'll come to me, and I can pass it to Carl. I should have his email.
Was that Carl Horak?
Carl Horak, yes.
Oh, very nice to hear from you, Carl. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. All right, one more question in the audience here.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little staggered there. Tony was asking, is there something in the Mountaineers Club that we're not doing that we should be doing? I've been wondering about that, Tony, ever since we gave this talk 15 years ago, because I noticed that we were shifting away from some traditional activities to newer activities. But I've been thinking about it a lot again. I'm working on the program again, and I don't know what to say. I think if we keep on offering a wide variety of activities, as long as we include activities, again, that require people to work together or learn skills together, I think that would be a good reason for our existence. It is strange for me to remember that we split off from the Outdoor Association 71 years ago, and we've survived 71 years, and the Outdoor Association has not. I don't know why. I mean, I don't have any data on that. You know, what did we do right that maybe they didn't do? Mike or Michael Alter was telling us, reminding us of some of the really good talks we've had over the years from not only expert climbers in our club, but famous climbers from elsewhere. And I thought about that just the other day too, Michael. I was wondering if I should have mentioned some of those in this talk, but I didn't quite know how to talk about talks while giving a talk. So I didn't try to, but seriously, there is a section in the Mountaineers history that's on our website that talks about some of the famous presentations we've had over the years. But yes, I heard Bill Prosky mention just as we started tonight that the core of the club is trips. I think that's really true. And maybe in second place, I would put what you were talking about is programs about shared activities. I remember over the years hearing talks from really good or famous people, and they were really inspiring. You knew you couldn't do yourself what they were doing, but it really inspired you to go out and do whatever you could do your best.
Okay, just a couple more comments from online. So Tom Cromer says, thanks for the memories, Norbert. He was a teenage member in the 1960s and was able to climb with many of the early climbers. Los Alamos Mountaineers and Explorer Post 20 set him up for a lifetime of adventures, and it was a great place to grow up. Thank you, Tom. And then I think that's Brett Kettering says that Steve Renaud and Ron Morgan climbed Itza and Orizaba in 2017. And Brett got altitude sickness on Itza and couldn't complete the climbs. And just one more comment that due to active eruptions, Popo was closed to climbers at the time, and as far as he knows, it still is. And then Tom had one more comment that the 1967 Tetons trip was led by Ernie Anderson. Is that supposed to be Anderson or Anderson?
Anderson?
Yeah. So just a note there.
Interesting. Thank you. I forgot about Steve Renaud and Ron Morgan and Brett's trip to Mexico. I think Steve's listening to this presentation, so I'm going to hear about it.
All right. Oh, yeah, we can go for the middle here in the room.
I think Barry Smith. Does that mean the top 200? Yeah, Barry Smith. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. The question was about has anyone in the club done the bicentennials, the top 200 peaks in Colorado? And I think Barry Smith. And Steve Renaud has done quite a few of them.
And there was one more question in the back.
The question is there a recent trip report about the Little Bear Blanca Traverse? I don't know. I don't know if anyone's done it recently. It was a very popular trip. I confess I was always scared of it. I've never done it. So I'm the wrong person to ask, I guess. Oh, Tony says Ron Morgan did it just a few years ago. Was that written up? Do you know, Tony? Oh, that would be a good source. Going to 14ers.com to see who's done that traverse recently.
Okay, one quick question from Tom. Is Larry, excuse me for the last name, Dahlsberg still alive?
I think so. He is living in Colorado Springs, I think. Oh, the question was, is Larry Dahlsberg still alive? And I think he is, and living in Colorado Springs.
All right, so a lot of people just commenting online here, just thanking you so much again, Norbert. Kathleen says you're a star, and thank you for the amazing presentation. Marie was so happy to see her parents featured in the 14ers section, and I'm sure a lot of people here are just so happy for the memories and the history. Anybody else here in the room? I think that's it online, unless I'm still watching, so if you want to keep typing, go for it.
I appreciate the Peak being able to do this as an online presentation. I was teasing my friend Greg Brickner. There was an email today saying the Brickners and the Clarks in Bend, Oregon were going to be watching the program. So I couldn't resist tweaking him a little bit. And if I had a smartphone, I bet it would be buzzing angrily right now. but thank you, Beth, for helping me do this.
All right, thank you. And thanks everybody for coming and for tuning in. Again, thanks Norbert for sharing the history of the Los Alamos Mountaineers with us